Hi folks, today we're going to be taking a look at a rail line in the south of England from Brighton to Southampton. As those of you who've been watching for a while will know, it's been about 3 years since the Great Britain in Simutrans map was finished, when all rail lines were completed, and it's been on the back burner since then. I've spent less time on Simutrans in that time, but I have been working on a few other projects, as those of you who read the forums will see. I did a project to create London's rail lines at a much more detailed scale of 20 meters per tile. That was completed earlier this year, and you can have a look at the results on the forum. It was a pretty interesting project, and it allows you to do much more faithful recreation of, for instance, the main terminus stations, like the 18 platforms at Victoria, and so on and so forth. But there's a reason that I haven't made any videos of it, and that's that it's just not very photogenic. Once you've got a scale that detailed, it's very hard to add buildings and other aesthetic bits to the map in a way that look visually satisfying. If you think about it, lots of buildings are larger than 20 meters, so a map at the scale of 20 meters per tile will make it hard to look realistic. And apart from that, it would be millions and millions of buildings. I forget how many exactly, but it would be more work than it was worth. That said, I might go back to that map one day and see whether anything useful can be done with it. But the time has come to revisit the old Great Britain map and see whether anything could be done with it. While I'd finished all the rail lines on it back in 2014, there was always some sort of unfinished business, and the longer that you leave it, the more there is to be done. So there's some new lines and stations that have been opened since I last visited this map. For instance, there was the Borders Railway and a few random stations in different places like Leeds. There've also been a lot of timetable changes, which are quite boring on their own and wouldn't be worth revisiting the map for just for those. Similarly, with changes of liveries on trains and introduction of new trains in certain areas, little boring things. But there are a few more interesting things that made me really want to return. One was just to make the map look better. In many places, the cities have sort of been hastily thrown together because I was mostly interested in getting the rail lines together and not too interested in making the cities as realistic and as faithful to reality as possible. That's something I'm trying to change a bit now. But not just that, I had only built cities where there were rail lines, and if you're from Great Britain, you'll know that there are also towns in places where there aren't any rail lines. So in order to do a properly faithful recreation of Great Britain, you'd need to add some towns in places where the trains don't go. So in this new incarnation of the map, I've been improving that coverage by adding some of the larger towns that aren't covered by rail lines and adding bus routes that go to them. So for instance, in the south of England where we are now, if you want to get from Brighton to Uckfield by train, then you have to go via Croydon. But there's a bus that goes straight there on its way to Tunbridge Wells, and that bus service is now added. And there's a bunch of other large places like Hailsham that aren't on the rail network that have now been added to this map, and I'll gradually go around the country and add those where necessary. So just to comment on the video for a moment, you'll notice we've just waited for quite a long time at Havant behind that train from Littlehampton to Portsmouth before we could get into the platform. This is because we were running slightly ahead of schedule. So I find that on this map, while it's pretty much a faithful recreation of the timetable, trains will run a tiny bit ahead of schedule. I'd say on average about 5%. I think this is because they don't have the same kind of human factors to deal with. There's no delays from signallers getting it wrong. There's no delays with passengers getting on the train. There's no delays because the trains are delayed. And apart from that, the trains are always operating at sort of maximum acceleration and braking capacity, which I don't think is the case in real life. So because of that, probably most services have to wait a bit to catch up with their timetable. And what we saw there was that the train from Littlehampton had to wait a few minutes in Havant, and as a result we had to wait behind to get into the platform. But when we left Havant, we would have been caught up with our timetable. So I mentioned that I'm adding bus routes to the map. I'm doing that by looking at towns of more than a few thousand people that do have a good bus route but don't have a train line, and then adding those bus routes. But I'm not trying to simulate them on quite the same level of accuracy as the train routes, because it's not really possible. You can't really simulate traffic, for instance, and the kind of delays that causes. So almost all the bus routes take less time to get to their destinations than they would in real life. I don't think at this scale it's really going to be possible to get around that. But it's nice to have the bus routes there just so that the passenger networks can be simulated rather better than they would be just with the train lines. So in my revisiting of this map, I've mostly been focusing on the south of England so far. I've done most of the area from Bournemouth to Eastbourne, including Brighton and everything you've seen on this map, and lots of the inland places near that, such as Salisbury, Basingstoke, Woking, Guildford, Horsham, Crawley, and Tunbridge Wells. I haven't yet got to tackling London. I think that's going to be a bit of a harder job. I've done a little bit of work in Lincolnshire and Essex as well, but it'll just be a gradual job of revisiting everywhere on the map and making it better. Is the general idea. But thank you for watching this video, and hopefully there'll be another one soon.